the holograph covers on the Power Rangers comics every time. You know, it's great because I love that triple page spread at the very end. That was absolutely amazing. So what did you pick that one up or something?
I actually did. And
Yeah.
I have been meaning to send to you, and I promise I'll send it. I just been too fucking lazy. I do have the New York Comic Con exclusive Power Rangers variant that I was going to send to you. I'm still going to send it to you. So it's the one with the, I think it's actually worth $50. So, I mean, you know, it'd be nice to add to your collection, but I actually didn't buy it. We were at the panel and I picked up, I think I tried picking up 2 copies of it, but I said, I got to get one for Joey.
Oh my God, dude, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Well, it's not, you know, I'm not into Power Rangers, so it doesn't blow me away. It's, you know, it's just, the cover is just, well, I could show it. It's just a kind of a boring cover. It's just the 2, I don't know what they're nunchucks or whatever they have. They're on the cover. Like, that's all it is. And anyway, it was exclusive to the panel. So,
you know what? It's Power Rangers. It blows my mind. I am totally in love with Ryan Parrott's Power Rangers. And yeah, and hey, we already got somebody watching, so yay. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and get started before we start geeking out of Power Rangers, because I could talk about Power Rangers all day and all night long.
Sorry. I just realized I didn't mean to use 4-letter language. I think I said a swear word there. I didn't realize we were live. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's like right as we were going live too. I'm like, oh, if they take us down, then take us down. Yeah. I'm not monetized, so let's have fun with it in that regard. I'm not monetized anyway. So what is going on? Welcome to Joe's Geek Show, the video series where we talk comics, and today's subject, comic book events. What makes them good? What makes them bad? What makes them marketable? We're going to have that discussion and more. And joining me today, once again, for the first time in quite a while, we have the man who makes comics go boom, Comic Boom. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be here, Joe. I'm glad, happy to be back and a guest on your channel. It's always a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we can have you on, it's always just so much fun, you know. Whether the conversation stays on topic or just goes off the rails, it's always a blast. So, absolutely, yeah. So basically, the reason why I thought, you know, this would be a fun discussion to have was actually a tweet that you had sent out. You were talking about the Marvel Empire event, and you were and then we kind of like had like a quick little trade about, you know, Empire having, like, you know, starting out with like, what was it, like 50 some issues or so like that?
50, I think it was 52 issues.
52 issues. Yeah. And then they still, like, you know, and they took away some, but still landed at 38, which is still a fairly hefty number for a comic book event.
Yeah, I think it was, I thought it was 52, and then they got rid of 21 issues, and there was 31 issues left or something, but whether it's 31 or 38, the point being, obviously, is that it's it really makes one wonder just how much actual business sense you got to question, sort of the editorial decision making and the business decision making at the big two. I mean, because on the one hand, obviously they've been making comic books a long time, so you know. Joe Geek and, you know, Comic Boom Joe, you know, we're just ordinary readers. You know, we don't run the business, obviously. So I like to think they know what they're doing, but it's like comic books are $3.99 American each, you know, and I just can't imagine why you would. I just have a hard time imagining that's going to attract a lot of readership, even if we're not in the middle of a pandemic, but especially in the middle of a pandemic. To have that many crossovers to an event that, you know, if the event is worth telling, I don't really know why you would need so many. What does that say about your ancillary books when they have to cross over with your big event? What does that say about the quality of the storytelling in those books that you need to have a big event in order to get people to buy those other books? It's just, there's something depressing about it, quite frankly.
Oh, I, you know, and that's true, you know, and you say it yourself. It's like, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So also, you know, a 38 book event is just also a question of marketability. for example, because when you have something that large and you're telling your reader, hey, this is a big event, you have to keep buying all of these books week after week after week after week, or however long they're going to be coming out for, and then when you have that, say, juxtaposed to the current DC death metal book that's going on, which is only going to be 7 issues with about 3 tie-ins roughly. Just on a question of where a person today in the current climate, whether they are working, not working, hours got cut or something like that, but they're still collecting comics. Just from that mindset alone, it makes definitely more sense that I would want to go for the one that isn't going to, in the end, cost me as much money, and you can get it done faster, then move on to the next thing and stuff. And we also have Tevye Smoka in the chat. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Tevye.
And he's saying that Countdown sucked and Future's End is one of the most awful events. And yeah, we might get some of these. Ultimatum might come up, a little bit later as we start talking about good and bad ones and stuff like that. But yeah, just on a question of marketability alone, it just really calls into question what Marvel is thinking in their current line right now about them pushing Empire with that many issues.
Yeah, and I think the first thing, just to maybe just give some structure to our discussion here, I think first and foremost, it's worth maybe noting some of the key factors that attract one to a big event, because there's no, I don't think I would never say that any of the principles that we might talk about in terms of what makes a big event good or bad, as Obi-Wan Kenobi says, only a Sith thinks in absolutes. There's no set rule. You can have a big event that violates whatever rules you think exist to writing them and still be good. It all comes down to the writing and timing and everything else. But first and foremost is theme. When I look at a big event, I want like, what are the stakes? What is the story? What's at stake? That's the big one. And not only what's at stake, but how long is this story and how long is it going to take to be told? And that's really big. And right now in the pandemic, we have Empire, which is basically a Kree Skull War, versus something called Death Metal at DC, which is arguably, it's only 7 issues long, I think with 3 or 4 tie-ins, whatever. Mm-hmm. Whereas Empire is, I don't even know how long is it, regular 6 or 7 issues itself, or 8 issues, plus another, how many ancillary issues. And, I guess we can decide for ourselves what what has more hype. Death Metal has more hype. Empire is kind of I think it hasn't got a lot of good positive. It hasn't got a lot of hype. It might be good, but it hasn't got a lot of good hype. And
yeah, I know myself, I haven't heard a lot of people like rave about it or even really talk about it too much.
Yeah. Well, and just the idea of the theme, what I like about Death Metal is, at a minimum, even though one can disagree as to whether or not you like the first issue, I like the stakes of Death Metal. There's a lot at stake. The outcome is the future of the DC universe moving forward. So the stakes are important with Death Metal, so that even if I don't like the story, I do, because I'm a DC fan, I'm invested in the outcome. So I like the stakes. I like what the stakes are and even what the themes are and the characters. So I like Death Metal as an event. Plus the fact that it's only 7 issues with 3 ancillary issues. There's always something epic happening every issue. And I know that from Snyder. He did the same thing with Metal, and he has to make the story tight. We know it's not going to be, like 39 issues like his Justice League. So there's something that we can rely upon as readership when we know it's a concise number of issues and we can budget for it. I like that aspect of it. Whereas Marvel, I get the sense Marvel is always about, they throw too many titles out there, and it can be very debilitating, I find. But I don't know, how do you, like, when you think of Empire and Metal, Death Metal, like, what's your gut instinct tell you?
Well, just from that alone, my gut instinct tells me Marvel's doing an event. You know, because like it's definitely one of those things, and I do think it's quite interesting. That you have these two companies, they're doing two events essentially going on at the same time. Between Empire and Death Metal, and that Death Metal, just like you said, it has all of the hype surrounding it. It has probably everybody collecting it. Yet I see little to nobody getting Empire, talking about Empire. I've seen maybe a couple positive reviews on my League of Comic Geeks app, because people go in there and they've been talking about it. But that's basically the only place, the only space that I really been seeing Empire come up in terms of like, oh, hey, it's actually not bad. So yeah, I mean, definitely when it comes down to the gut instinct, for sure, everything tells me that Death Metal is going to be the more successful out of these two, because I mean, not only do you have Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, who these guys make a great team. They make a great team, no doubt. I loved them on the new Batman 52. I loved the original Metal. Last Night on Earth, I thought was really fun. Yeah. And then when you come over to Empire, yeah, I mean, you've got what is it, Dan Slott, and is it Al Ewing writing it? Yeah, Al Ewing and Dan Slott. I mean,
Mark Waid is
Mark Waid as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause I know it's a few different writers that that are on it, and these are these are good writers and stuff over there, but definitely in terms of them being considered a powerhouse team as opposed to Snyder and Capullo, it's it's almost not fair in a sense. And then added, of course, knowing that Metal is going to be a shorter series, so of course I'm going to put all my attention and focus there. And then I don't know if Empire like somehow turns out being good, I'll probably pick it up in a trade most likely, because also dedicating yourself to a continuous event, knowing that you have to pick up 30 plus issues to get the broad spectrum of everything, is very deterring, I feel. Because I know for me, the last time I was ever on an event that was relatively large in scale was for over on Marvel, was a time during the Avengers No Surrender back in I think it was like about 2017. Yeah, about 2017 or so, sometime in 2018, where it was 16 issues. It was one every single week. And I mean, first off, I was surprised they actually kept up with it. Yeah, every week and managed to get it all out. But I just remember, especially towards the end, after the 7th or 8th issue, it's like started to get a little like, oh my God, we're still going, and almost in that respect, because it went on for so long, I was like, this would have been way better in a trade rather than picking up in a single issue. So ever since that experience alone, every time I see that an event is going to be, so long, I have to sort of tell myself, let's just kind of gloss over it in favor of the shorter ones, I mean, and of course, not to mention also around that time, Marvel was doing like 50 events a week as well. And we also have Luke Johnson joining us in the comments. And he says, I think part of the difference between Death Metal and Empire is actual change. Like it or not, or like it or hate it, Death Metal will bring change. Possibly 5G, Empire will end, and Avengers and Fantastic Four will go back to business. And then Avengers will do Avengers things, and Fantastic Four will do Fantastic Four things with minimal, if any, change to the book's actual direction. And that is also a big part. And even you had said this, Boom, as well, is because at the very end of the Death Metal story, we are going to see the DC universe change in a very large way, where they have DC books tend to have that bigger impact on stories going forward. Marvel's rarely do. And
and that plays in with another factor about big events, and that is the resolution, the ending. At the end of a big event, does it go back to a status quo? Does it establish a new status quo? Does it have an actual ending? Or does it not have an actual ending? Is it vague? Is it satisfying? That's really it's a huge test of a big event. And I think what DC and Marvel have experienced at different times, depending obviously on their event, is the relative successes and failures, because if you don't nail a landing on a big event, readers don't forget that, and they can become quite jaded. And Luke Johnson alluded to it. He mentioned it, that DC, we don't know exactly what the change will be at the end of death metal. It might be, I think the jury is, I don't think we're going to get 5G. I think that's scrapped, but who knows? We're probably going to get some elements of 5G. I know there was a rumor now, Bleeding Cool had the rumor that Superman's going to be leading the Authority or something.
Yeah, I read that.
I actually straight up, I actually think that's a little bit of, I don't even mind that as an idea. I just don't want it written by Bendis, because I would rather have Wonder Woman lead the Authority and have her maybe snap some necks, but that'll never happen until I finally write the character and she finally gets popular. But that ain't gonna happen either. But no, it all comes down to consequences for me. And you said something that was interesting. You said about you mentioned the Avengers No Surrender. It was 16 issues long. I actually like the fact that it was out every week too, and I enjoyed that. If I know what the ending is, and it can be like 16 issues is basically 3 months, or pardon me, 4 months, and I can get behind that, because I don't like when it lasts forever. I personally really love big events in individual stories. I mentioned this to you before. I like to me, a big event is taking place in Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil right now. It's a great tale of it's a huge fall from grace redemption arc again for Matthew Murdock, which always seems to take place in Daredevil. That's what I love about everybody loves the Daredevil comic, because every writer, if you put them on Daredevil, they seem to write their best when they're writing Matthew Murdock. There's something about that title that just shine. And Chip Zdarsky, he's right up there with Mark Waid and Bendis' run on Daredevil, and I like Charles Soule's run on Daredevil as well, first half anyway. But I like the fact it's sort of like a miniature little event, and it's just in Daredevil, and it's you don't need to collect any other thing. It's just Daredevil, and it has the epic nature of an event, and it feels special because it's even though it's issues come out once a month, I can forgive a longer big event if it's just in one individual title, because you're really invested in that character, ironically enough. And yet it annoys me when I have, like you said, 52 issues of Empire, or even when they reduce it by 21 issues and it's still 31 issues. Good grief. Now that includes side issues, and they always say, well, you don't need to collect any of that side issues. Well, then why have them? Like, why have them? I mean, if I don't really need to, if it's 6 issues long and there's like 16 other issues that you don't need to read, well, then why have them to begin with? Like, I don't get it. Like, you shouldn't need, with the stories that bad in those individual titles that you desperately needed to have some incorporation of a Kree Skull alliance invading the Earth. I mean, I don't know. Don't get me wrong. It sounds maybe like it could be some cool ideas there, but sometimes I wonder, like, I don't know, man. Some of those editorial summits, I feel like somebody's got to go in there and give some couple of bitch slaps on some of the editors.
Yeah, well, I mean, for all we know, maybe Marvel was like, hey, we haven't done an event in a while. We usually do like 16 a year, so why don't we just do one massive one, and everyone will get it, right? Stick the big writers on it, and as pretty much that. And I think you bring up a very good point with tie-ins. If they say you don't need to read the tie-ins, yeah, absolutely. It's like, if they're non-essential to the story at all, if it's not really adding much to the plot or filling in some kind of gap that the greater story isn't going to get, what's the general point? And I think, again, maybe death metal, the first death metal, was a very good example of tie-ins. I collected every single tie-in to that because, I feel like in some way each story did serve its own purpose, to the overall narrative. Yeah. And when you look at again, an event like Empire, where they're like, yeah, we're only gonna have this many issues. The rest are just tie-ins. You don't need to read the tie-ins. So you're telling me not to go buy your books. You're telling me I don't need it. Well, so now I'm not gonna.
But look at the flip side. Let's say you don't want to collect the event and you just want to keep collecting you want to keep collecting your Daredevil and your Thor and your other titles.
Yep.
But so you can't even do that because all your other smaller titles, you're trying to avoid the event, but you can't because it's infiltrating all your other comics that you're reading.
Yeah.
So you can't avoid the event anyway. And so the story that you've been enjoying in these other titles, it's interrupted by the big event, and it's just frustrating as hell. I mean, that happened. It happens all the time. I mean, as comic book readers, we're all used to it. We see it all the time, and I guess it's like one of those things we just sort of accept it because we know once a year, some storyline's going to be interrupted because of an event of some kind, and I kind of like you mentioned Metal. One thing about the original Metal when it came out, I love the side issues they have of the the
Dark Knights.
The Red Death and the different Dark Knights. Instead of they did have some. It did sort of spill over a little bit into Teen Titans and some titles, but for the most part, rather than have it cross over into all the multitude of titles, just create new titles like one shots. I like the idea of one shots. Have one shot titles that deal directly with the event. That I don't mind. That way, you're showing confidence in the event, and if I don't want to read it, I won't. And the one shots, I might pick up a one shot and not buy the event. But if I buy the one shot, it will be a genuine interest pull on my part because it captivates me and I'll read it. And if I like it, I'll buy the event. I like that, but I don't like when they infiltrate my title that I'm enjoying against my will, and it just annoys it. It just like grates on me, especially if it's Daredevil. If I'm enjoying Daredevil, and interestingly enough, isn't it fascinating that Marvel rarely messes with Daredevil? You notice that even through a lot of the events,
that's actually a good point.
Marvel will not mess with Daredevil. I always find that interesting. They have a couple times, but most of the time they don't mess with Daredevil during an event. Even during War of the Realms. I don't think they messed with Daredevil during War of the Realms. Although, even though Daredevil was, even though Daredevil was the,
he had some kind of sword or something, or I haven't
Rainbow Bridge and all that stuff.
Yeah,
blind and that was, anyways. But,
yeah. Well, you definitely has some. You definitely have some fun stuff to say on that. Yeah, and that's true. It's why not just create the one shots and not interrupt the stories and stuff like that, or even like you said, keep everything confined to one particular title. I really like that. It's like cool. If you want to do a big team story that's going to shake the foundation of the universe, have your event, have your one shot tie-ins. Perfect. It's a nice little bow. And then that way, if you want to skip it, you can, Yeah. Or like we were saying, keep it all in-house within one particular title. That way you can continue to enjoy your book as is, without, the fear of like, do I have to go pick this up? Do I have to go pick that up and stuff like that? And, and I think these are definitely interesting, ways to look at, just how different, these two companies do their books in terms of their events. Marvel likes to try to tie up, the event into pretty much anything they can that is accessible to be tied up in. And DC, they're more like, okay, let's try to keep it as in-house as possible. With, like you said, in the original Metal, that's probably one of the few times, where they did kind of cross over into some of the other ones. But at the same time, it's kind of like, when I was reading The Flash and stuff like that, I didn't feel like I was intruded on too much. It was just, I think, a single issue before, it was back to business as normal. So I felt okay by that, because it wasn't a lot. It wasn't 50, like 5-6 issues in a row.
Yeah. One of the things that I find really interesting about big events is the difference between how the intention, it's the difference between theme and a thesis. And the way that I would put it is, and I had to write this down, was A theme is exemplified by the action and utterances and thoughts of a character, whereas the thesis is what the author's, what the writer's implied worldview is. So to give you an example, and you can do this with every big event, and it's interesting to do it. Take, for example, the big event of Superman's revelation of his secret identity. And that really was an event. Now, it wasn't a separate, but it's an event in the pages of Superman and Action Comics. Now, the theme, now, we can guess what the theme is. The theme of Superman revealing his identity as Clark Kent, it tells us something about Superman's actions, about how Clark/Kal-El views his life, about the revelation of his truth. He's exploring. He wants to have more of a family life. He doesn't want to hide behind things anymore. He's gone through some struggles with his wife, and his son has been aged up, and he's lost him to the 31st century. And you can, you can imagine what he's going through. So there's all kinds of themes emotionally that you can maybe ascribe to the story. But you can also, if you look at the thesis, if you look at Brian Bendis, what does that tell you about Brian Bendis's view of the world? That storyline. That's what is so interesting. Because what is Brian Bendis's worldview right now? Well, it's about truth. Well, you can probably guess he's not a Trump supporter. You can probably guess he's against fake news. He says, I think it says his worldview is, it's truth no matter what. Truth hurts, but if you embrace truth and you reveal the truth of who you are, even though you're going to get attacked, even though it might endanger the lives of everyone you love, that's okay. It's the truth. The truth is all that matters. You shouldn't hide the truth. You should have strength. And that's what it tells you about Bendis's worldview. And if it sounds like I'm criticizing Bendis, I'm not trying to do that. I'm being sincere. I'm being a little bit facetious.
Well, I mean, it's a little hard not to criticize them in some aspects.
Yeah, so I'm being a little bit sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek, but you get my point. And so that's what I find fascinating about these big events. And you can do this, and I'm not picking on Bendis. We can do this for any event. Like, take, for example, Scott Snyder on Death Metal. You can look at it in terms of the theme of Death Metal is about hope overcoming darkness, doom versus justice, about how the heroes were heroic, but the people still chose doom because they never had enough faith in their heroes. Superman and the Justice League never lost hope. It was the people, the citizens of the earth that did, and they voted for doom. And so that's the theme playing out there. And yet, if you look at Scott Snyder's, what is that? The thesis, if you listen to Scott Snyder talk, his implied worldview there is the world is a depressing place. It's a horror-filled place. We're always losing. We're always being shot down. We're all depressed right now. We need heroes, but we don't believe in anything anymore. And it's interesting. If you look at, there's always a dichotomy between the theme and the thesis. And when I look at it that way, sometimes these events become more exciting to me. And sometimes, and I say this as a compliment to writers, compliment to Snyder, and a compliment to Bendis, is that I can respect the thesis. I can respect what Bendis is trying to say about truth. I can respect that because I believe that's a valid point, and I can respect Snyder's point of view about those things. The real key is, how does it translate in the comic page? And how does that translate into the themes in the story? Because it's the characters that have to play out. And sometimes, in my view, I don't think, for example, and I say this with respect to Bendis as an example, I don't think that the exploration of truth right now, as much as the real world might need it, while we would love to have truth instead of so much fake news, we want more genuineness. I don't think, and I might be an outlier in this, I think Superman's the wrong title to tell that story in. I think Wonder Woman is a far more appropriate character to tell the connection between deception and truth. I think Wonder Woman embodies deception and truth. With the magic lasso and her connection to the gods, it brings in faith and mythology, just as an example of what I'm getting at. So I think when these writers, when they're at these editorial summits, if they even have them anymore, I think that one of the discussions they have to have is, okay, well, we have the theme. Well, what is this? What's the thesis? What's our worldview here that's guiding this story? Because that's what's going to make fans resonate with it. And just a quick aside, my favorite big event of all time is actually Civil War at Marvel. I thought it was that was the best big event of all time because the themes and the thesis were fantastic, and it was so good. The idea of, you know, what's a hero? Is a hero somebody that listens to the state to be registered, or is a hero somebody who acts on their own, acts according to their own conscience and not by government authority? And the theme, if Civil War was coming out right now, if Civil War was an event that was coming out right now in the middle of all these riots and protests, it would be a lot more controversial than it was in 2006.
Oh yeah, and I agree, and yeah, definitely that's a great pick for an event. I absolutely am in love with Civil War myself. Like I do love it a lot. So like one thing I especially love about Civil War, also in terms of its story, is it's still a highly debated topic of who really was right. You know, even though Cap did ultimately step down and stuff like that, you know, it's still a very good questions to pose. Within the book that you can even translate into real life and stuff like that. So I think this is also a good point where we can start talking about, you know, some other events and stuff other than Empire and Death Metal and stuff like that, where we can kind of start like digging into them a little bit of, you know, we can look at an event and say, was it good? What made it good? You know, or was it bad? What made it bad? You know, and then just kind of look into and breaking down, you know, sort of how to make an event succeed and or fail based on, you know, these criteria and stuff like that. So I guess starting out with that, do you have anything you would like to share?
Well, I made this joke with Dark Knight a few times that I try to challenge myself and try not to say something bad about something Bendis has written. But it's just impossible. So I always end up giving an example on Bendis, but I did try to give Bendis a little bit of a compliment earlier. But if we want to talk about, you know, I think Civil War was an event that was done right. It had a resonant theme. The themes were extraordinary. The themes
absolutely
were controversial. The themes dealt with character, each individual character. When Civil War came out, I collected all the side issues. I wanted to know what each character chose. So I bought their individual titles because I wanted to know what they thought, because how a character makes that choice. Do you go with Tony Stark or do you go with Steve Rogers? The choice you make will define your character. It said something quite a bit. It said a lot about Peter Parker that he chose Tony Stark and then began to question it. It said a lot about Peter Parker that he revealed his identity, secret identity. And that was a controversial thing that happened, but it was character. There was movement, there was gravitas, there was consequence. It had all the hallmarks of a perfect big event that were just absolutely nailed it. And well, that's an example of a good one. I'll let you name a good one too, and then we'll get into maybe a bad one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have a couple other people joining in. We got Jeff Brosamer, who's actually a local comic book cohort. They go to the comic book store every single week. So how you doing, buddy? And Eric Breen coming in saying, good evening, gentlemen. My pick for best Marvel event is Dark Reign into Siege.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like it. And then, of course, hashtag Bendis Challenge. So for me, just to name a good event that I just absolutely utterly love. Well, crap, you know what? I've been talking about it. I've been on a kick of Power Rangers lately. I even had to go back recently and I reread Shattered Grid. And I absolutely love this story for several different reasons. I mean, on top of being a huge Power Rangers fan, I just love how, for one, serious the story takes itself. You know, it takes a really, I guess you could say, like, you know, hokey children's concept, and, you know, brings some seriousness to it and some themes about, I guess you could say, like essentially ideas like, drafting children into war, essentially, and stuff like that. Questions that we watch Power Rangers as kids, we don't think about, but as adults, we definitely do ask these kinds of questions of why choose kids over adults. You have kids that are fighting this war. And of course, Shattered Grid was basically, you could just say it is the infinite crisis of the Power Rangers universe. And just on every conceivable level, the story just works, and, just being centered around an alternate version of a character who was evil at first because of a spell, but then upon having the spell broken in this alternate timeline, stays and embraces evil and stuff like that. And it's just fantastic. And I absolutely love Shattered Grid, the Shattered Grid event from the Boom Studios Mighty Morphin Power Rangers books.
I have to tell you that hearing you talk about that theme, I've never read a theme like that. I've not read Power Rangers, but I love that idea. That's a good question. I've always thought the whole theme of, that's a good question. Why would they power up children and teenagers to fight in a war? I don't know the answer to that question. Obviously you do. I might have to pick it up and trade, and we'll have to, that's a topic for another day. I'll have to educate myself on that. But see, that interests me. And I've never, to be honest, and it's my own fault, I've never really looked into Power Rangers, but I didn't really think of that theme in that way. Maybe if they would have marketed it like that, I'd be more interested in it. But that's a theme that actually interests me, because I think I've always thought it was a little bit kind of, I know it's a comic book thing, but I always thought it's kind of crazy that you got teenagers that are fighting evil, and you got kids like Young Justice running around. Why aren't they in school? How come their parents aren't wondering where they are? Do you know what I mean? Like how
Oh yeah. It's, I mean, you would think, if nothing else, and I remember I was watching, I think they brought it up in this documentary, Unmasked, the Unmasked documentary, where they even said, where Stan Lee was, I think it was Stan Lee that was talking about it, where he said that he always hated the idea of children superheroes and children sidekicks and stuff like that, because if nothing else, CPS would show up at your doorstep for endangering a minor.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. But.
Yep. We got Jeff in the comments. Events are becoming too common. They need to stop doing them so much.
I actually kind of I will agree that they don't necessarily need the big events so much, but I will say that they should have more. They should
minuscule events
more in the individual titles.
Yes,
like they should hype up the individual titles, because each title has their own event. Like, for example, we talked earlier about Daredevil. I think what's happening in Daredevil right now, Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil, is it's just a wonderful event. It's a character-driven event. It's that good, and it should be hyped up that way. Yet Marvel just knows it doesn't even have to advertise it, because they got a bunch of people buying it, but they could have more people buying it. Because in terms of quality storytelling, it's clearly better than Empire. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Empire Zero, and I might be in the minority, but because I don't know nothing about the Kree Skull War, but I enjoyed the backstory. I don't mind it. But in any event, I think that the more advertising should be about the events going on in the individual titles, or even I kind of miss the old Justice League, Justice Society crossovers. I remember back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there was an annual JSA JLA team up. And you had the heads on the side of the comic book. And I know I'm dating myself, but I like that. Every year, like, why not just have one event? Like, why not have a tradition? Bring back a comic book tradition, an annual Justice League, Justice Society event, or an annual crossover between two good books, like maybe an annual crossover between, I don't know, Wonder Woman or Batman or Superman. Like, just start some traditions here. Like you have Free Comic Book Day. Start an event, an annual event, instead of having an annual huge big event. Just take your best characters and have them just sort of get together, and I don't know. There's just a lack of creativity, I think, sometimes with the big two. It just sort of surprises me. They don't think more outside the box.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes and it really does seem that with events, specifically becoming increasingly, more common and stuff. I mean, I can't even say increasingly; they are very common these days. Because I do believe, a lot of times there may even be just a little pressure to want to push, events and stuff like that, because events, for the lack of a better, for lack of a better term, and stuff, they do tend to sell fairly well most of the time. And when sales start to slump, two things that the comic book industry, especially the big two, can always rely on: events and number ones. These are the two big things that they like to do. When sales start to slump a little bit. Because I do remember, the same day that the last issue of Death Metal, or the same day that the last issue of Metal came out, the first Metal, Doomsday Clock hit up its number one. And I even said that in my new comic book day video back then too, where I was just like, "You did it, DC." It's like I ended one, you just pulled me right into another. I felt like I had no choice in the matter. I mean, obviously I had no choice whether to buy or not, but I was like, "It's Jeff Johns, it's Doomsday Clock. Did I really have a choice? I don't think so."
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I'm going to mention something that's very predictable, and I was bound to say it. Anyone who knows me knows that it was inevitable that I was about to say something negative about a particular event, and we can't not talk about Event Leviathan. I mean,
Oof.
Or non-event Leviathan. Now,
the great non-event of the DC universe,
right? And rather than I'll try not even to mention Bendis's name. Let's just dissect the Event Leviathan, and let's talk about just basic structure, approach, build up, hype. Let's talk about all those things. What were the stakes? What are the themes? The consequences? What's the thesis? What's the point? Are the characters interesting? Are there crossover events? If you look at all those things, this fails on every metric. That's what makes this so incredibly astounding, is that if I actively try to say something good about Leviathan, I can't do it. I literally can't do it. This thing failed on every level. This should not have been an event. This should have been something that just took place in the pages of maybe Superman. And this character should have been built up organically over the course of a year, or even possibly 2 years. This should have been in the works a long time. This was a character that was forced down our throats. He was a nobody. Nobody has heard of Mark Shaw. The 6 issues were boring. It was talking heads. It was the wrong artist. There was no action. There was nothing at stake. They told us something was at stake. All these intelligence agencies were destroyed and taken over by Leviathan, but then he was actually defeated off screen by Batgirl, teenage Batgirl. You want to talk about a kid defeating this big villain? I mean, this is incredible. This was everything about this event was catastrophically wrong, and it was laughable. People are laughing at it, and the ultimate insult is that it's literally Event Leviathan Checkmate has literally been taken. It's not even been resolicited. It's been either outright canceled or will be brought back at a future date, sometime probably in the unforeseeable future. and Secret History of Manhunter was also canceled, which was related to it, because Leviathan was a former Manhunter named Mark Shaw. So that was taken off. This was definitely a misstep.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, because I only read the first 2 issues of Event Leviathan before I kind of just gave up on it, because I knew you were gonna. I knew you'd keep covering it, so I was just like, I'll just watch Boom's videos. I'm not gonna keep torturing myself, because everything about the book was just wrong. Even the way the characters talked, like in my first video, I had to make fun of the way, as they call it, Bendis speak, where characters just don't talk like themselves, and it's just like, it was almost like he was wanting to try to do Shakespeare beer or something. I don't know. It was just it was very off. And I do agree. I love Alex Maleev, but he was just not the right pick. He was not the right pick for that. And later on, hearing what you had said, that Batgirl was the one that defeated him off panel. It's like, so you mean there's action in this book, but nobody got to see it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is absolutely insane, you know. And it almost makes you wonder when you have a book like that, you know, when you're pitching that to editorial, saying, "Hey, I want to do this event. I wanted to, you know, follow this format. I want it to be like this. I want it to be, you know." And I'm, you know, and on paper, I'm sure it sounded great, you know, mystery, espionage, and all that stuff. But you forgot the action.
Yeah.
You forgot the action.
They forgot that it was supposed to be fun. They support it's supposed to, you're supposed to build up hype. This is supposed to be fun. There's nothing at stake. There literally was nothing at stake. And literally, well, I don't want to harp too much on it, but I mean, if you're gonna destroy all the intelligence agencies on the planet, the concept never made any sense. Even in a comic book world, it never made any sense. If you destroy the government, if you destroy every intelligence agency today, you're going to be a wanted terrorist tomorrow morning, and you're going to be dead. You're going to be dead within 2 days. You're going to have the entire but yet Leviathan, not only is he not dead, but all the intelligence agencies are destroyed. Now there's only 2. Well, you're telling me if I wiped out the FBI tomorrow morning, there wouldn't be an FBI in 2 days? I mean, that's not how government works. You can't destroy government intelligence. If you destroy it, you're gonna get the government going to war. They still have a military. Like, it never made any sense. And then to top it off, he buys an island. He actually bought Markovia, Leviathan. So he wipes out all the intelligence agencies, and then he buys an island. He just has the money somehow to buy an island called Markovia, which is where Geoforce used to live. Geoforce's sister was Terra of the Teen Titans, of the Judas contract, the one that betrayed the Titans. Anyways, but that's so there's remnants there of a decent story, and you know that Bendis I said his name, sorry. He wants to create his own Doctor Doom. That's what he wants. So the idea, or pardon me, a Magneto. I think the idea is to have Leviathan be the Magneto of the DC universe, which quite frankly, I think is a good idea. I think we need, I think DC would benefit from maybe having higher level villains on the playing field, but boy, the execution that lead much to be desired.
Definitely glad I skipped out on that one then. And from the sounds of it, the fact that DC, like you said, even decided to just let go of the sequel series and any tie-ins to it is, that's what you call a failed event when DC doesn't even believe in it. When your publisher does not believe in your event, that is that. But let's get it off Bendis, and let's talk about maybe sometime an event where maybe sometimes editorial getting involved a little too much can sometimes go awry, especially if there's like trade-offs and like leadership and stuff like that. Spider-Man the Clone Saga, I think, was a great example of what can happen when, you know, you have a guy who has an idea. It's like, all right, this is the event, this is what it's going to do, and then that leader leaves, another guy steps in and is just kind of like, let's just kind of restructure a little bit and change the flow of the stories and stuff like that. And then you end up with a story that, I mean, the Clone Saga is got to be what? I mean, just in trade paperback alone, like, what's there, like 8 volumes of that or something? There's quite a few books that, like, it lasted like about 2-3 years or so.
It was a long time. I can't specifically remember. I just remember the backlash and how angry people were, and how they just the backlash was just incredible. And it was actually one of those. The irony of the Clone Saga, it's probably one of the greatest comic book screw ups of all time that actually indirectly almost benefited Marvel to the extent that, yes, they had a downturn in Spider-Man sales, but it showed how passionate Spider-Man fans were. And when Spider-Man came back, he came back stronger than ever. And so they definitely rebounded and came back strong. And they definitely learned a lesson. and they got fans talking. So it's sort of like, part of me thinks it's that old expression. It's a cynical one, saying, even bad publicity is still good publicity. You know what I mean? Because I think that it reminded. I think Marvel needed that reminder that this character, that Spider-Man is special not because of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is special because of Peter Parker. And if you and that you despite what science might say, a clone of Peter Parker is not Peter Parker.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. And it was just crazy, just like, because I remember reading it, because because I actually had read the Clone Saga like as it was coming out, because I was a kid. I've been reading comic books. I love comic books. Spider-Man comic books was huge when I was a kid. Right. And and I just remember reading it over those years. It was like that constant pull. It's like, okay, it's done. Oh no, but he's been replaced. This is not the real Spider-Man. And then he goes so long. That is the real Spider-Man. And then he's not. Then he is. And then he's just like, I mean, to this day, I even would have to wonder if they might not pull it out somewhere at some point. That the current Spider-Man is still Ben Reilly or something. And that was just one of the most interesting. Just the story behind that event, I always found so fascinating. I watched a documentary on it. Well, not really a documentary, it was a YouTube video where they do documentary styles. I can't remember if it was Owen Likes Comics or Matt Draper at the moment. I know it was one of those two. And just the breakdown about just the change in leadership over at Marvel, and the constant reshuffling of where they think the character and the universe essentially should be, was extremely fascinating. And, and to watch it just go longer and longer and longer, and just hearing also how the writers and stuff were just getting frustrated to the point where it was like, by the time it wrapped up, it was like, we just got to end this. We got to get it done and over with so that we can, move on to something else. And stuff like that just always fascinates me about, how a book can be so bad, but so interesting at the exact same time, to a degree, even though it's not really an event book, it's almost like All-Star Batman and Robin to me. It's a bad book, but I still like to revisit it from time to time, just because of how crazy it is and how insane it got. And Clone Saga is kind of the same way. Every once in a while, I do like to go back and revisit it, just to kind of remind myself how nuts it was.
Well, and not only that, it's funny because isn't it weird that we talk of the Clone Saga as if it was an event, but it never felt like an event to me, because it took it's anything that takes 2 years to tell isn't really an event in my mind. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't a separate, like, it wasn't like it was a 12-issue series or a 6-issue series, or it wasn't like Secret Wars or Contest of Champions, or it was actually, it took place in the pages of Spider-Man, and it felt and I didn't like the fact that he was a clone. I didn't like it, as just like no one liked the outcome.
Yeah.
And the end did it, of course. But I enjoyed the journey. Like the journey getting there, up until you realize that Peter Parker was the clone. That just took place in the one issue. But the journey getting there was exciting reading. Like, I enjoyed the reading of it. I enjoyed the journey. And I liked the fact that it all took place in the pages of Spider-Man. There wasn't like 12 collateral side issues where, so that's, in the context of our discussion here, to me, this makes our point, or at least the point that I was making earlier, and I think you agreed with me, that telling a great story within an individual comic book can become an event. Because I think it's interesting that the Clone Saga, we call it an event now, but at the time it was just individual issues of Spider-Man. In sequential numbering of it took place in whatever it was, 24 issues of Spider-Man. That's what it was. I mean,
yeah, no,
really, yeah. So, but that's what makes for good storytelling, and of course they ended up having to put lipstick on the pig, of course, and it took them a while to do that. But hey, we did get Ben Reilly out of it, right? So that's a character that is a favorite of a lot of Spider-Man fans, like Ben Reilly. So even out of the midst of a bad event, sometimes you can get good characters.
That is true. That is true. You know, and I always like situations like that where it's like, okay, if we can at least get a positive out of a negative, that's great. But then every so often, events can lead to a negative or so. You know, I know people like to. I know one thing that I hear come up quite a bit. You have Civil War, for example, huge event, awesome event, great event. And from that, what kind of stories did we get afterwards? One More Day.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you gotta look at the fallout of certain events and how good they were. Oh, so and I think those that could also be its own discussion for another time as well. But so so kind of just to summarize, sort of what we're just kind of seeing, because I'm guessing, sounds like we're pretty much on the same page. Essentially, it's like, things that can make a good event good is, of course, having really, obviously you got to have well constructed themes and ideas and stuff like that, and also to a point where if you're going to have like a huge event that may or may not affect everything, having something streamlined within its own pages, make it its own book, give it its own one shots and stuff like that. Or like you said, and of course, that is also a very good point is, we could definitely see more events too come down the pipeline in single books, such as like where you call Daredevil an event. My wife just dropped her off.
I see that. I could hear her before I could see her.
Yeah, I was trying to keep her off screen, but that didn't happen.
I like Eric Breen's comments here. He said, he makes the comment, Marvel had every intention of Ben Reilly being the true Spider-Man. Fan outrage changed their minds. Imagine that there was a time when Marvel listened to their fans. A little bit of sarcasm there, but some truth there to that. There's no question about that. Yeah, there's a couple of events happening right now that one event's happening right now that I quite enjoy because it's happening all in the pages of Batman is I like Joker War. I like the Journey to Joker War. And it has, because it deals with all of Batman's rogues, it deals with some new characters, Punchline, the designer. It's just a really well crafted story. I'm really liking it, and it's not in its, and it's I guess it's definitely an event, and I think DC's doing it right. I'm really enjoying it because you can just sit back and enjoy Batman. And now I'm not a big fan of having to buy Nightwing and Batgirl and Red Hood and all this other nonsense to it. But I also don't think I probably need to buy those other side issues. But just goes to show you that if it's an interesting premise, I don't mind. I happen to collect Nightwing and Red Hood anyway. But I mean, I kind of wish they would have their own stories. But in any event, I don't mind. Again, if the story's good, there, I don't mind it, and every now and then, I love me a good Batman event, and Tinian the Fourth, man, he seems to have a good handle on what he's doing there. I also like Death Metal. I'm actually enjoying Death Metal. I like the fact that it's, that it centers on Wonder Woman. It's sort of, it's going to be, I think it's going to, we get a lot of substance in the issues. A lot of stuff is happening. So I really like that. And the other thing, positive series that I liked No Man's Land. I like Batman No Man's Land. I like the Judas Contract by Teen Titans. It's another one that took place within the series. Daredevil Born Again, which was probably a classic, one of the most classic. And Daredevil Born Again. Most people think of Daredevil Born Again. It's not really an event, but it definitely, it's an historic.
it got its own trade paperback, you know, where it says
Exactly.
Daredevil Born Again. So you could argue one way or the other.
Yeah. One I'm gonna say one little bit I'm negative on, but it's in a different category, is Jonathan Hickman's Powers of X and House of X. That is an example of an event that I think is resets the status quo. And some events, that's what some events do. They don't really tell a story so much as they reset a status quo. Now, arguably, maybe death metal is just going to reset a status quo. Like death metal might just reset the DC universe for a new multiversal status quo.
Right.
In which case, you know, I hope it also tells a story too, and actually has a good theme. And I hope it actually tells a story as well as just resetting the history of the DC universe. Powers of X, House of X had great concepts, but it never really finished any of the stories. It just reset the status quo. And you really got to read all the X-Men for the next 3 years to know what the heck's going to happen to the X-Men. So I had to opt out, because that's an example of when all an event does is reset a status quo. It's like, it's a turnoff for me. And even though it might be good, let's face it, if you like House of X and Powers of X, you're pretty much invested in like 5 or 6 or whatever it is now, 7 or 8 different X-Men titles. Well, that to me, that's a betrayal of the readership. I don't like that. That's really screwing over the readership. I just disagree with that.
Yeah, it really does speak, volumes about, asking your reader to say, okay, hang in there, get these few more books, And I do remember, back before death metal started, when it was announced, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. I hated the idea. I was actually mad about death metal, just for the simple fact that, after hanging on with Scott Snyder for Metal, Justice League No Justice, his entire Justice League run, that at the very end, they're like, now you got to go buy some more, and you got to invest more money. Yeah. And that is actually one of the things about events that I have come to hate over the years too, is sometimes they do go for what I do like to call the cheap cash grabs, where to a degree, I was always getting it. I was always going to get it, just because I want to finish the story. I'm invested in it at this point, and I want to see how it wraps up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's just like, when you stick with a story for so long and you expect a resolution, in a particular book and stuff like that, you're almost kind of left with yourself of, should I do it? Should I actually continue forward, or should I jump ship? Because for all I know, death metal could end, and they're like, to be continued in a new ongoing series post 5G or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we you mentioned cost. We haven't really talked about cost, but we talked about the number of issues. But cost is definitely a factor nowadays, and especially now, if in the new age of potential pandemics, I mean, people's budgets at $3.99 a comic book American, they've got to start rethinking events, and they've got to start rethinking how to make stories more concise, and maybe getting to their point sooner, and maybe fine-tuning and streamlining the themes that they want to address, and any thesis and commentary they want to make toward the larger world, if they're going to draw some analogies there. And that's just me. It has to be the new business model for both the big two, because I think it was Jeff Brosmer in the comments he did make the comment that he's not the only one collecting more independent titles now from the big two. You mentioned the Power Rangers, right? Mm-hmm. That's another, I mean, I've not read it, but obviously I love the theme you mentioned. There's a lot of good events they're miniaturized events. Valiant is a great independent, comic book company. Is really good. Great stories, and they've got, great stories to some events.
Hold on Olivia, sorry.
Well, yes, we're talking about events, Zach Richmond. Joff Brosmer, Mary Jane, let's talk about Peter's girl, friends or relatives. His first slept with Peter's enemy. May was a ooh. Okay.
Wait, are you talking, Jeff? Are you talking about the what was it that what was it that off like that story was not canon? You're talking about the one where
Well,
Mary Jane. Let's talk about Peter's girlfriend or relatives first slept with Peter. Oh, the time Gwen Stacy slept with Norman Osborn.
oh, right. Okay, yes.
Was it Sins of the Past?
Right. And that's right. And wasn't his Aunt May also, that was the Trouble series.
The Trouble series. That wasn't canon.
It was kind of was using condoms or something, and it was like it was
yeah, Aunt May was like Peter's mother.
Mhm.
That was just overall very bad. I don't know why I would do something like that. Definitely, I do feel like sometimes with certain events, maybe they do need to vet these ideas a little better, like so we don't get stuff like that, because that one's just way out there. I always thought it was weird, and also like the idea of Gwen Stacy sleeping with Norman Osborn, that was always just kind of gross. That was a no-go for me. But yeah, no, we were talking about what was it? Cost on events too and stuff like that, and how shorter events tend to be, more beneficial and stuff like that in the long run, because, we're more likely to stay on a shorter event than a longer event, obviously. And yeah, like that's, it's definitely something you always want to look at when you're like seeing a comic book event coming out, I should say. Kind of lost my train of thought there, so that's sort of weird. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I guess what it comes right down to it. I mean, I like throwing my money. If I'm going to be spending a lot of money on comic books, I want to get some bang for my buck, and I don't mind investing in an event every now and then. Mm-hmm. My biggest splurge, I remember when Secret Empire came out with Marvel, and I know at the time Captain Marvel or Captain America being a Hydra agent was such a big deal. I thought I thought that was just a great idea. It was coming out of Civil War II. I wasn't a big fan of Carol Danvers, but all these crazy plots were converging. Carol Danvers and was being manipulated and by Captain America. So was Tony Stark. Hydra Captain America was manipulating everybody, and I thought it was an exciting time to be reading Marvel, to be very honest with you. I actually bought all the crossovers.
Did you really?
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the journey. I was a little disappointed in the ending, but so, all this talk, this is why I often say that when I talk comic books, often I admit to some degree of hypocrisy, because, I bitch about comics all the time, and yet I go buy them and read them and talk about them. So obviously I love this hobby, and I love a good story, and it's, to me, it's like when you watch a bad movie. I mean, I can rattle off a bunch of bad movies that I watch religiously whenever they're on TV because they're so bad I love them. And I'm like that with some comics. Like, honestly, here's the irony. I'm going to mention Event Leviathan again. I will never forget Event Leviathan. It is such a bad comic book that it's actually funny. Like, there's some scenes that are so bad that they're actually, I will never forget them because they're that awful. There's some Bendis speak. The language is so ridiculous and so insane, but I'll never forget it. It's like, it's that Friends dialogue. Hey, remember watching the old OC from the 90s, those 90s shows, like, hey, how's it going? Hey, yo, hey, yo, hey. You know what I mean? Like all those teenage popper, that's Bendis speak. It's like, hey, what are you doing? Here, over here. Where? Here? Why? I mean, it's a Bendis script. I mean, anyways, sometimes you just got to sit back and it's like a popcorn movie. The only problem with eating popcorn and reading a comic book, that doesn't work is you don't want to have butter on the popcorn because it devalues the comic because you can't flip the page. It's very frustrating. So I stopped doing that. So now what I have is I actually have unsalted peanuts, so I don't mess up my page.
Yeah, just make sure those peanuts, don't have any oil on them either, because I don't know. My dad worked at a peanut factory, and he talks about stuff like
Are you
that.
serious? He works for a peanut?
Yeah. Well, trail mix. He does trail mix.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to remember that. I'll have to bug you about that. Your dad worked for a peanut factory. Yeah, my dad was a welder, but he wasn't a peanut factory. It's like that's an expression. It's like oh look, it's a more comment from the peanut gallery. I mean the peanut factory.
Yeah, exactly. Like the minute my dad told me that some time ago when we met back up and stuff, not to get off topic, that was one thing he's like, yeah. But I work upstairs. I do like the logistics and stuff. But I look at the machines. I know how it's done. Like that's fairly fascinating. Not to say whatnot. But to just kind of get back on topic, talking about events and stuff like that. Sometimes I do also wonder when it comes to events, especially if it's going to be a shorter event and stuff like that. Sometimes I do wonder why single issues also still, and I've always felt that certain events should just come out as a trade. I think it would be really great. Because it's good to just read everything all at once, I guess you could say.
Well, I agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I really like the Earth 1 series.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Superman Earth 1 volumes 1 to 3. And they did 2 volumes. Grant Morrison did 2 volumes of Wonder Woman Earth 1, and then there was Jeff Lemire did 2 volumes of Teen Titans Earth 1. Harding, what's his name? His last name is Harding. I think he's the writer for doing Green Lantern Earth 1, Volume 1. Volume 2 is coming out in a month or so. Taking 96 pages and just telling a nice epic story, it feels like an event, and it's nice, and it's packaged in a nice hardcover. I also really like stuff like this. I love Black Label because Wonder Woman Dead Earth, for example, it feels like an event because boy, man, this is a really good story. But there's something epic about this. Like, to me, a lot of an event deals with presentation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Even Civil War II, as much as I wasn't a huge fan of the storyline, Civil War II was a beautiful package. The art by David Marquez in Civil War II was gorgeous. The packaging, the comic books were just gorgeously put together.
Oh, yeah. The covers were a little harder.
Yeah,
the harder paper.
Yeah, and it, and actually there was a lot of, the stakes were high in Civil War II, and I actually enjoyed Civil War II. I love the fact that it pissed me off. I like comic book. No, but if a comic book really pisses me off, I'm talking about it. I'm passionate about it, right? And I don't mind being pissed off a little bit, because there's always that fine line. I like, if I have to defend my position or talk passionate about it or get pissed off, I can do that, and it's kind of fun. Like, I like bitching about how badly written Superman is because it's so bad. Superman is so emasculated now by Lois Lane. It's ridiculous. The guy literally has to ask for his testicles before he puts his cape on. It's that bad. And the sad part is, I don't know if you noticed this, but have you noticed that when Superman revealed that he was Clark Kent, I was hoping that Clark Kent would stop being meek and mild. But instead, what Bendis has done, he's made Superman meek and mild like Clark. That's what I feel. Like, I would have thought, finally, he's revealed to the world that he's Clark Kent. So now Clark Kent can stop acting like an idiot, like a meek and mild, pathetic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But instead of Superman pretending to be Clark Kent was pretending to be Superman, essentially.
Yeah. Because this is one thing that Bendis has gotten completely wrong, where I know he hasn't thought it through, is that if the people who knew Clark and knew Superman and thought they were two different people, they thought they were two different people because they're very different. They act very differently. Clark Kent had a different personality and he acted differently than Superman. So now that they know that they're the same, which personality governs? Do you know,
Yeah.
what I mean? Therein lies the story, in my view. Okay, you revealed, okay, so I guess was Clark and Super, if you've went your whole life portraying two different characters, now you've told the world that you're the same person. Well, there's a lot of people that still aren't going to believe you because if you were that different that you could pull it off. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah, no, you're saying it's essentially the biggest missed story opportunity was a story of duality.
Exactly. And that story, he hasn't told that story. Instead, he's focusing on some ridiculous truth and about the Daily Planet and whether or not the Daily Planet's going to get sued because Clark Kent worked for the, like, he's not focusing on the character. He's focusing on the superfluous crap that nobody cares about. Like, that's what blows me away. Like anyways, I see I broke my rule. Talking about Bendis.
Well, I will say, in context to, you know, being an event within the pages of Superman, a big event, you know, with the story with truth and stuff like that, you know, and you do see it a lot of times in regular stories too, and even Civil War too. I noticed this is that one of the biggest things I just hated and couldn't stand about Civil War 2 was I wanted to like it because I thought a lot of the setups, and even in Bendis' Superman, the idea isn't inherently bad. It's just generally the execution and the story that follows is where these stories tend to fail. Civil War 2 is one of those stories where I think that it's something that could have been good, and I will oftentimes compare Civil War 2 to Harbinger Wars 2 over at Valiant. For me, Harbinger Wars 2 was what Civil War 2 should have been or could have been, essentially, when you have, you know, these heroes fighting each other, essentially, you know, with you know, one, you know, thinking, you know, it's like, okay, I'm doing everything I can to protect, you know, the superpowered people. And, you know, you got the ones that are like with the government and siding with their countries and stuff. It's just kind of like, no, we need to kind of, you know, stick with you know, the law and stuff like that, you know, and then of course you got your characters that are in the middle, you know, the gray area essentially, who might be kind of playing both sides a little bit. You know, nothing will frustrate me more than a story that was almost good or almost enjoyable. You know, I mean, if a story is excruciatingly bad, that's, you know, that's something. But if a story is great, that's awesome. But a story that was almost great or almost good, that's.
This is related to what you were saying and what I was saying earlier, that because I Googled what information about what a theme is just to get help organize my thoughts. And a theme is a subject of a story, thought, or topic. We know that. But there's two categories of a theme. And I never thought of it like this way before. One is what readers think that the work is about, and the other category is what the work itself says about the subject matter. So what's interesting here is now to what we're talking about, when we look at the theme of a big event or the theme of a story, and we, like, you know, if we look at the Bendis example with the secret identity thing, what do readers think that is about? Okay. I thought it was going to be about something totally different than what it was. That's what's funny. Now that can make it interesting. So, but clearly Bendis thinks that what the true storyline is about is that Bendis is assuming that the revelation of his identity is a good thing. That's the first thing that Bendis is assuming. You know, he's assuming it's a good thing. He's assuming it's a good thing because Toyman's reforming himself. Everyone's so supportive of it. The entire government doesn't even care that Superman proclaims himself king of the earth to alien races. Everything is so happy-go-lucky. You know, Bendis just assumes everything's just hunky. Everyone's so goddamn happy because Superman reveals his identity. The truth is such a good thing. You know,
the entire Justice League applauded him too.
Yeah, they're gonna sit down. Batman smiling. I mean, Batman smiling, for God's sakes. I mean, smiling. Like, seriously? Like, like this is what's funny is that when you look, so if this is a big event, if you're writing the characters in a way that I think is out of character, and they're reacting to this event that is in my view out of character, then those two categories on theme, that right, you know, I'm a reader, what do I think it ought to be about or is about, versus what does the work say, what does the story itself say about the subject matter, about Superman. And the way Bendis is writing him, there's a disconnect there, because I can't get into it because I just can't see this working. I can't see it. It doesn't work for me. I can't see it. I can't even see Wonder Woman being supportive. Even Wonder Woman, who's the epitome of truth. Wonder Woman ought to be telling Clark, look, Clark, I know more about deception than I know about truth, precisely because I have a magic lasso that I have, you know, that's where I think Wonder Woman's core strength is. Wonder Woman knows deception because she knows truth. You can't know a lot about truth and not know a lot about deception. And I think Wonder Woman embodies that. And I think Wonder Woman would tell Superman, "Are you insane? Yeah. Why did you do that?" I can't see Wonder Woman. They didn't even do that. Like Bendis couldn't even reflect on that. Like have Batman vehemently disagree, but no, Batman just all. It had Batman and Wonder Woman have a conversation after the identity reveal. Batman had Wonder Woman over at the Wayne Manor, and they had a conversation. Greg Rucka wrote it in the Superman Heroes, and Wonder Woman was just, you know, Bruce is just jealous, you know, Bruce wishes that he could, you know, maybe one day he could be as truthful and open as Superman is. It's like, it's this pathetic beta male crap. It's like nonsense. Like it was a fundamental misunderstanding of not only Superman, but the entire Trinity. And it just, and that to me is, I don't know. It takes the steam out of the event. He just doesn't get it. Now that's, you know, but I guess, you know, it's interesting because I think mainstream media, the people that never read comic books, but the reporters at the New York Times, when they interview Bendis about, you know, what's the storyline you're writing? Or they're just eating this shit up. They're thinking like he's, you know, redefining Superman. It's like, no, he really isn't. Anyways.
Yeah. I mean, no. I think you make some very solid observations and points there too. You know, you do got to sit there and you got to think that, you know, on the surface, you know, Bendis honestly probably truly thinks he's writing a very good story there. You know, obviously we are reading something different. We're interpreting it differently because, you know, there's that obviously that disconnect between what he's seeing and what we're seeing on the page and stuff like that. And Jeff says if Batman smiles, it's not Batman.
That's right. Oh, I just want to say to Jeff Brosmer, he says Dead Earth sucked. I read the first one and couldn't get into it. I would say to you, Jeff, the first issue was slow going. In this third issue, it's the greatest fight between Wonder Woman and Superman you'll ever see. Wonder Woman actually rips and kills Superman with she absolutely brutalizes and kills Superman. It's one of the most violent Superman Wonder Woman fights I've ever seen. It's insane. Some of this art, absolutely insane. She actually takes kryptonite spikes. I mean, look at how she kicks Superman. Look at that.
Jesus.
It's a brutal. It is an unbelievable fight scene. Because Amazon Themyscira is destroyed in a nuclear attack. Man's World attacks Themyscira. And Wonder Woman freaks out and she takes it out on Superman and actually kills him and literally kills him. It's brutal. And then she you know, passes out for a few centuries and wakes up again. And she realizes that she kind of destroyed the planet. And so it's kind of it's actually an exciting, depressing tale. But
oh my gosh.
Anyways, but I enjoy this. It became very good very quickly. It was like, what happened, man? But this is what I like. I'm really liking Black Label lately because it's like it's out of continuity and it's shocking writing and it's good and it's visceral and it's, you know, the best comics right now are being written outside the big two.
Yeah, I would, you know, there's definitely a lot of, you know, I think there's probably a lot of support for that idea too, you know. Because I mean, in and itself, the black labels could almost be seen as their own internal events and stuff like that. Because when you get one, it's just like, what do we know? You know, when it comes to a black label book, we know it's going to be out of continuity. We know the stories are generally going to be a little more bigger. The writers are allowed to be just a little bit more creative. You know, safer when they decide to throw a batawang at us. Then you know the internet will collectively freak out. But yeah, I mean, you know, it always is interesting just to even talk about events in itself. Just how many different kinds you can really just dig into in terms of events. You know, I mean, obviously one that we've talked about are the big crossover events, essentially what some call the summer blockbuster of the comic book world. You know, these are your Secret Wars, your you know, flashpoints and stuff like that. You know, these are your Civil Wars and all that jazz too. It's like it's really, you know, big groundbreaking stuff that generally tend to more or less shake the foundation of their respective universes and stuff like that. And then naturally, you know, we have your things like the internal story ones. Like, you know, you could almost argue that, yeah, stories like Truth or what's going on in Daredevil could be seen as events within their own books. You know, the Flash Age within Joshua Williamson's The Flash, the previous storyline, that could almost be in and itself a Flash event to a degree, just because of how big the story did end up getting. I mean, I did have some criticisms for it, but you know, but yeah, you know, and then you get your black label books or your Earth One books, you know, these nice out of continuity, just hardcover or prestige format printed books that, you know, can offer you something different outside of what we call the status quo. And, you know, almost to a point, I would almost say that, you know, I could feel comfortable right now, like say after this current run of the Flash and stuff like that, you know, that maybe outside of like just Power Rangers and like maybe a couple other books that I read off the side, that I could be comfortable just waiting for black label books and Earth One books to come out, and books of that nature, and not, you know, instead of getting, you know, all these single issues and stuff like that, you know, will probably lead to an event down the road that could be hit or miss either way you look at it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because I personally would love, I think, like for the Black Label series, anything Black Label, like I'm loving the Question, I'm loving Harley Quinn, I'm loving Batman Killer Smile. These to me are all great these are great stories, and they're like I love the packaging. $5.99 I think is a good price point for oversized. I really appreciate the art. Like I can't believe, maybe it's because I'm getting older and I need glasses and my eyesight's not as good, but I really like the bigger page. I really enjoy the bigger page in my hand, and and especially when you get really good art, you really appreciate it that much more when it's bigger on the page like this. And then of course, here's the smell.
Oh, there's always the smell, the new comic book smell.
Oh man, the smell, sipping my Corona, smelling my comic, it's like the perfect high, you know?
Oh yeah.
Peanuts on the side, it's just perfect. But
just tell everybody reading your comic book, hey, I'm gonna take a bump real quick. That page smells great. I love the ink. It's phenomenal.
That's great.
So let me ask you this. Just a crazy thrown out there question. If DC came out tomorrow and said, we're only going to do black label books, you'll get one book every month, would you be all right with that?
Of each character, you mean?
No. Well, like as they're doing it right now, like you just have the like Killer Smile, your Dead Earth, and stuff like that.
I would have no objection if they got rid of the floppy. If they got rid of the floppy and had this come out once every 2 months, something in a better format like this, more pages, maybe 60 to 96 pages, and have this come out like once every 2 months or something like that, but you know, bigger and in a better packaging, I think it would sell more. I think that because they have to do that. I might be wrong on this, but I know I was telling this to Dark Knight in one of his channels, one of his topics there, that I do think that's the wave of the future. I think we're going to get better packaging. I think Black Label is the way to go. I think that they would sell. I just think it's
the right move.
The right move.
I know I was talking to Dark Knight pretty much about the same thing, and this is definitely a point that I want to touch on in a later video. Like I do want to have a full discussion. Maybe all three of us can get on and talk about this. About how at this point in time, with the way everything is, the comic book industry needs to evolve with the times and stuff like that. And that's definitely one way to do it is to have a book like the Black Label come out, every, with a longer period of a longer stretch period, so that you can have more pages, more quality, and it'll probably end up selling a heck of a lot more because you're offering less to your consumers. And I mean, I think that would work very well for a future endeavor.
What I don't know, and is that the cynic in me says there must be a reason why they haven't done it already. I'm thinking, is that maybe the business model is not as sound. Maybe they do make more money selling 6 individual floppies than the trade, then the hardcover, then the absolute edition if it's a big event. But to be honest, like there's such a huge oversaturation of comics in the market between Marvel and DC. The better comic books, and bloody well, this is my fault. I'm kind of a hypocrite. I should, if I only reviewed the comics I enjoyed the most when I do review on my channel, they wouldn't be DC or Marvel. There are so many great indies that I'm reading. It's insane right now, and I collect a lot, and so a lot of good. Oh, I could just rattle a whole bunch off here that I'm just loving right now. But it's a great time to be collecting comics, even despite the pandemic. There's so much to read, but there's no question. Oh, you know what? I'm going to ask you this because, and this is a little off topic, but Weird Science DC has this thing where if you had $25 and you only had $25 to spend, what would be the 5 or 6 comics that you would buy? So $3.99, so that's 6 comic books. Let's just say 6 times 4. Forget about any tax, whatever. So that's 6 comics. If you'd only collect 6 comics this month, 6 comics, what would they be?
Okay, this should be really interesting.
You got $25 to spend. That's it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say this should be relatively interesting because $25 is usually my limit that the wife likes to give me. So, well, generally $25 a week, but if for the entire month, if I had to collect 6 comic books, obviously the Flash, I like, because I'm such a big Flash fan. Sure, I have to get that. I have to get them. I would be getting let's see, Go-Go Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Let's see. Tinian's Batman, Justice League, and you know what? I'm gonna go with. Ooh, that last one's tough. Donny Cates Thor.
Nice. Yeah, I would go with. I would. Well, I mean, I break it down between DC and Marvel, but my DC would be Batman, Aquaman, Suicide Squad, Hawkman, Justice League Odyssey, and Death Metal. Those are the DC characters or comics that I'm enjoying the most at the moment. Batman, Aquaman, Suicide Squad, Hawkman, Justice League Odyssey, and Death Metal. Those are the ones I'd go with, and that puts me right at probably right at the $25 mark. Marvel would be Thor and Daredevil. Those are the only Marvel I own, and Star. But Star is now finished as of issue 5. That was digital. So those are my only Marvel titles right now, are Thor and Daredevil. Both really good. And, of course, Chip Zdarsky and Donny Cates. And I literally got a slew of independent titles that are just incredible. I wouldn't even know where to start, honestly. Like honestly, I really
Well,
enjoyed Wind by James Tynion. Sonata, I read a lot of that. I like Old Guard, Force Multiplied by Greg Rucka. Old Guard's on Netflix on July 10th. Check that out. It's about a group of immortals that are like sort of like mercenaries. Awesome comic book. Anyways, these are all big events. I mean, really, it's all everything's an event, right? An event is what you make it, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think that's I think that's a good note to actually end this on. And so with that, I had a lot of fun, man.
Yeah,
I had fun. This was a great time. This was a good conversation. We got a whole bunch of awesome people in the comments and stuff. And hey, Second Street Marvel popped in to say good night. He's got to go.
See you, Second Street.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So hey, thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, we had tons of fun. Boom, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure as always. I always love to pick your brain and just see what you think about certain things and stuff like that. Maybe if you throw out some more tweets, we'll have more discussions based off that. Hey, everyone, if you are not subscribed to Comic Boom, I've left the link to his channel in the subscription down below. Make sure you go do that. His content is phenomenal. I love I love your comic book reviews. They're so much fun. And then, of course, he's also a frequent collaborator with Dark Knight Nations, and you got one with him coming up soon on Friday, tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Rah. And for the life of me, I can't remember the topic.
Oh, okay. Well, here I was giving you a chance to plug it in.
He's gonna kill me. But anyways, yeah, just check it out. We're always ranting and raving about something. So
yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't, make sure you hit that thumbs up button on the way out. If you haven't tapped it already, subscribe to me, to this channel. If you're not subscribed already, ring the notification bell and all that fun stuff. And hey, take care. Have a great day or good evening. And as always, stay geeky.
See you later.